This week, the most powerful AI model in the world was banned and turned off after it had been released by the Trump administration, who declared no non-American is allowed to interact with it in any way, which includes using it like we all do or even building it. And if you think about this, something like 7 of the 8 people who invented the transformer paper were non-Americans. And so this is not just, I don't have my favorite model anymore. This is not just, capability of AI clearly being controlled by the government, but also potentially a huge shift in where AI power is in the world. Because Ian, what's Europe going to do? No European government can use the top models, and no European is even allowed to come to the US and build these models, right?
So Friday, about 5 p.m., I received a text message from a Dr. Matt Pashensky, who was letting me know this had happened. I thought it was a joke initially. I was like, what is this? Honestly, I could not believe, the ramifications are huge. You just touched on Europe. Europe's had a strategy of hands off AI, stay away from us. Maybe Mistral and France, you guys are doing okay, that's fine. But, let's not get over our skis in terms of AI. And then suddenly, in an instance, comes the realization on about 3 a.m. on Saturday morning in Europe, oh shit, the spigot's been turned off to AI. We don't have any AI. And our competitors, our global competitors have it.
Let's go down. I think just preview to the listener all of the things that we have to talk about just to understand this one thing. It was the most powerful model, Fable 5, which was derived from Mythos. We got to talk about Amazon betraying Dario. The Dario White House, how it actually went down is extraordinarily interesting. We got to talk about the impact to the value of SpaceX, which, by the way, did the largest IPO ever. And I think its stock price is going up a huge amount over the last couple of days precisely because of this. So we got to unpack all of these things. Multiple multi-billion-dollar acquisitions that are happening. It is an extraordinarily interesting time. As we go through this, we got to imagine that we maybe never get another good AI model again. If we actually take the government in its position seriously, we might never see a model better than Opus. And we might have seen our last one, and everything else is restricted to large corporations and the governments, and governments will have their own AI. So let's go through all this. We can tell the story of what happened on Friday.
Precedence has been set. So Friday, there's some conversations between Anthropic and the White House, apparently spurred on by Amazon, who said, hey, we were able to jailbreak Fable 5, basically work around the guardrails.
Yeah, I did. I think we did our last podcast episode. I was in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Wonderful, relaxing week with my children. Still worked most of the time, but just a nice location. Dario, similarly, is feeling a little bit, he's had this fight with the government, with the Pentagon. They're banning the U.S. government from using Anthropic. He's in all these fights, and he's preparing for this $2 trillion IPO. He had raised a $900 billion valuation round, is now looking at pretty stressed out guy, right? So you think, hey, let's give him a day off. Let's send him to a wellness retreat. Let him recover, right? And so every paranoid fantasy you have, that the second you close your eyes as a CEO of a startup, you got to imagine you just can't take your foot off the pedal for a second, or it's all going to collapse, right? It's in your head. And they finally convince you, hey, Dario, you got the bags under your eyes, looking a bit run ragged. You're giving some kind of not great messaging. Let's get you recovery, right? Friday, go to a wellness retreat. What happens to him? White House calls him in the morning and says, Dario, we need to talk immediately. Dario is in the middle of some kind of, meditation or massage. They couldn't get Dario back and briefed until afternoon, which apparently just completely pisses off the White House. And Trump very famously doesn't go on vacation. So I think, that's the precedent. Like, vacation, what are you doing, right? He's in a wellness retreat. What the hell does that mean? They probably told him his wellness retreat. They should have said he's negotiating with the government of China right now. If you want to talk to him, we're going to pull him out of his conversation with President Xi. Yeah. They didn't say that, right? Well, Dario's at a wellness retreat. We'll get him as soon as possible, which probably just puts the whole thing. I think that soured the whole thing, So Dario doesn't get back, finally gets on the phone with him. They described the jailbreak, right? Which was basically, we've now learned not a jailbreak where, jailbreak can sometimes be a situation where you convince the AI that you're a security researcher and now it gives you full access to all the Mythos capabilities that you want. And that's not what happened. It wasn't like, hey, find a way to help me hack the federal government or the security of a tank or something. It was, if you have the source code to a product, you could ask it, how could I fix the security bugs that are present in this product? Now, when you fix a security bug, you're implicitly pointing out the location of those security bugs. And so it was really a very weak jailbreak. And that's what Dario said. This isn't a jailbreak. This is just you fixing a bunch of code that you already have access to. But they told him that he needed to have a fix, but really it's a type of thing that isn't in their security paradigm. Their security paradigm is to detect malicious offensive cybersecurity. And what this was if you give it a piece of software with an obvious bug in it, it'll fix the bug. It's like, that's Claude Code. I mean, it's just a good version of Claude Code. If you have access to the, seeing the source code of a product, it's very easy to hack it. That's not my problem. So I think that was probably Dario's position. And Scott Bessent made the call, very likely in coordination with other people in the cabinet and maybe Trump himself, because this is a big decision, to just shut it off for everybody. But they didn't just shut it off for everybody. They specifically singled out non-American citizens, which you imagine people like Stephen Miller in the federal government. Hey, we're gonna nationalize this in two senses. One, the U.S. is in control of Anthropic. Anthropic is just an arm of the U.S. government. Yeah, they can have your profit and your IPO and all that, but if we call the shots, we get what we want, and we tell you what happens. It doesn't happen. That's a big change from maybe what we might call the liberal economic policies of the last, from Reagan onward, certainly. And so when you look at the leadership of the top AI companies, and especially their top researchers, this might hollow out 50, 60% of AI researchers and send these people with intimate knowledge of how to build the very best systems in the world, like Andrej Karpathy, right, who had just joined Anthropic, right, one of the top guys, one of the founding team of OpenAI, built Elon's self-driving code, and had just joined Anthropic. Well, is he going to go to Europe, who now has an incentive to drop, I don't know, what's the European defense budget? $5 or $6 billion. It's going up, right? Now, maybe all of them, this is the coordinating event that, all we could get last month was Jan LeCun, and we gave him $1 billion. But man, wouldn't you like to give Andrej Karpathy $25 billion to recruit every single top researcher in the Valley who doesn't happen to be American? That's the stupidest thing I could think of. Personally, I see no value in taking researchers like, how do we build the space program? How do we build the first computer? You have like the von Neumann architecture. We paperclipped them out of Europe.
I mean, it's so there's a potential opportunity for Europe. I mean, Europe needs to learn a lesson there. The other implications are essentially trust has been broken and a precedent has been set, and so Europe should learn some lessons. Let's talk about Dario's culpability or not in this whole thing. The mechanics of the day aside, right? He wasn't at his desk, whatever, right? But they have presented Fable 5 as this atomic bomb, so to speak, potentially, that needs to be managed and managed only by them. And so there's an argument that he brought this on the company, right? They've put their whole marketing and positioning around it's this uber super powerful thing. We'll trickle it out to you guys, but we'll be the arbiters of who should have it and who should not have this power. And people were saying last week, hey, listen, you're going to draw some interesting attention on yourself. I didn't really think anything would happen, but here we are.
This is what I said. So I put a post up in the Breakneck podcast, and I tweeted out the podcast, the breakneckpodcast.com post. So if you're following breakneckpodcast.com, which is our personal website for this podcast, and after we recorded an episode, I looked at this ominous report about recursive self-improvement. And we've talked about recursive self-improvement on episodes, and recursive self-improvement is very interesting because essentially the AI would have the ability to build a better AI. Well, that means you don't need any people, right? That's very interesting. And so it's also very threatening that we might have, however fast AI has moved over the last couple of years, we might be in a situation where it could move even faster. It could be more disruptive to the economy. And what I wrote at the time is Anthropic is walking a tightrope between a monster IPO on the one hand and national nationalization by the US federal government, on the other hand. And I think that's really the tightrope they're walking, is that they need to make everyone feel that all of the resources in AI should be going to Anthropic because, yeah, in some sense, they're greedy and they want financial results. And in another sense, they have this messiah complex that only we are actually responsible enough to be in charge when the breakthrough happens. And the idea of this runaway RSI scenario is that the AI starts improving the AI. So whatever AI is even marginally ahead, it's an exponential process. So even if you're only ahead by a little bit, you become more ahead over time, and more resources flow to the one that's ahead, which further exacerbates that inequality between the various competitive models, right? And so they're promoting the scenario. That's very good for an IPO. It's you might only have 1% of your portfolio allocated to the Anthropic IPO, but if it goes that way and there's the foom, this kind of foom, and Anthropic just suddenly has perfect AI and they're the only ones in their control of it, and they're able to defend that. Well, that 1% might be your ticket to extreme wealth, and the rest of your portfolio goes to zero. So you gotta get allocation in this Anthropic. I think that is a very similar stuff. We can segue a little bit to the SpaceX IPO. SpaceX IPO'd at almost $2 trillion. And since its IPO went live, they've been up 46%. I think they had the IPO share allocation for the insiders at $135 a share. It's right now is at 220 today, and it's down to about 200 at close, it looked like. But still, like, that's a massive, great IPO. It's very good news for Anthropic and OpenAI, who want to do similar size IPOs in the future. But they're telling this amazing story about it's winner take all. It's going to be explosive growth. Elon said that, SpaceX is going to be a $50 trillion company. It's like, well, now if I say 10 trillion, it just sounds kind of conservative, right? Like, all these CEOs are telling these IPO stories, but what are they also doing? They're creating a permission structure for the government to say, well, we're not going to let you release a super intelligent AI onto the world that could reprogram our DNA and turn us into cattle, or, whatever people's.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't say that as a CEO. And you can see Satya Nadella at Microsoft. He had a much more inspiring message, almost like, hey, everyone, could we talk like this about creating economic growth and creating an ecosystem? But Dario is convinced that it's going to be a singularity. It's going to be one company with one model. And in 1 hour, it's going to be like Skynet, and it's going to go from not self-aware to self-aware. And then after that, there's nothing you'll be able to do. That's like a Terminator 2 style, scenario. And we've all been conditioned to be very wary of that by James Cameron. So
Yeah. So Dario's arguably clipped his own wings, or clipped the wings of his own company. Let's talk about something that's arguably even bigger than that, which you started with, which is this idea that this might be, or sorry, let's say Opus 4.8 might be the best AI we ever see in the public sphere.
I got my Fable on my vacation for a few days, and then the government said, nope, too powerful. And I was just getting home from my trip. I was just going to sit down at my workstation, really see what Fable could do, and it gets turned off. It's a very good chance that we're not actually going to keep sharing these advancements that we've gotten from AI. We're not going to share the models. And if it really is winner take all, and it's this national, every nation against another nation, maybe it's the end of the period of time when we're going to be sharing scientific results, because this intense competition, instead of having an open, cooperative world, Trump, as his legacy, is going to leave us with, no, everybody needs to retain their own information, because if my AI has a little bit better understanding than chemistry and I share that, then potentially somebody else could build the nanobots that come and destroy my country or destroy my AI. I need to retain all this knowledge for myself, because it's all competitive. It's all dedicated towards winner take all.
So one of our biggest episodes ever, it was probably 9 months ago now, maybe a little bit more, was
Something like that.
AI 2027, which
Mm-hmm.
was some of the best forecasters in the world got together to kind of predict and forecast what was going to happen with AI. And a big part of their premise was this sort of geopolitical dynamic, which was going to play out. And frankly, Matt, you and I aren't going to look very good, because we were like, we poo-pooed that. We're
Yeah.
like, don't really think that's going to happen. But what we're seeing is the very leading edge of regulation now. And think about what that means. What things are regulated, right? The financial industry is regulated. The legal world is regulated. There's a bunch of things that are regulated and they're slow moving. And what it means is, generally speaking, we as the general public do not get open access to these things. So what we're potentially seeing is exactly that, the leading edge
And
of
you know,
regulation.
we were scared about this thing where Mythos was only released to companies like Oracle. And if you look at it, you know, there's so many points of leverage when the government has the ability to do the things it's doing now, right? And I think that's a big part of like these corrupt countries is that the more the government intervenes, it's not necessarily the intervention is good or bad on its face. Usually it's bad. Usually it's not. It's counterproductive, in my opinion, when you do like, hey, let's control rents. It's like, well, then you get less rentals built and ultimately the price is higher. But also, in addition to it, the price being higher and, you know, basically less valuable for the average person, there's a whole bunch of opportunities for corruption. And the San Francisco government, you know, a bunch of people got arrested by the feds. I think they all should be arrested by the feds. But I moved to Texas. I don't get to choose anymore. Because every one of those city councilmen who was restricting housing was also getting kickbacks in the form of all their nonprofits had to get kicked back to in order to get authorization because the city council had the ability. If you see Anthropic as an AI as the core of the U.S. economy, and instead of free market competition being the check on these different things, it's the U.S. government being able to pick and choose every model, every application, but then also Larry Ellison, who owns CBS, CNN, Paramount, go down the list now. He owns Oracle, big Trump supporter. He gets access to Mythos via Oracle. Anthropic needs to either give access to these great models to these certain people, or it gets shut down. OpenAI has been, Greg Brockman is giving millions and millions of dollars to the Trump administration at OpenAI. They don't get shut down, right? So it's like, you know, even if you've lived in 50 years of Reaganite kind of free market ideology, which a lot of people are upset with, it's like, oh, neoliberalism and like, oh, post, you know, late capitalism. Well, guess what happens after late capitalism? A completely corrupt, all-powerful government, which, by the way, already has nukes, but there's really no way for Trump to make money off of like not nuking somebody. He hasn't figured it out yet. I don't want to say no way, but like, there's no way for him to be like, hey, you need to pay me a bunch of money or I'm going to nuke you with my 10,000 nukes that I have. So it's an all-powerful government, but it really doesn't have a way to like, you know, make money. Being able to pick and choose every single company that either gets the good AI or doesn't, and every single country that gets the good AI or doesn't, creates unlimited pathways for corruption. And to the point where it's a self-sustaining corruption cycle, I think people need to be
Yeah.
very wary of.
Well, it might not even be as dystopian as that, but if you're essentially saying that we're going from a free market to a regulated market, let's work out how that, you
This
know,
is not. This is no. This is not a regulated market. There's no regulations. It's not regular in any sense. There's no laws. It's Trump arbitrarily using various powers, and just the fact that it will take the courts 9 months to unblock this.
regulated in the formal sense, but it's regulated by an entity, and it's going away from a free market dynamic. And it's essentially, it's like, imagine going into your investors or prospective investors and pitching Anthropic now or Anthropic a week ago. You're talking about fundamentally, like, the valuations of the business must change as a result, right?
Well,
If nothing else, your TAM is fundamentally different, right? You
well,
don't
look, I
have
think
the A in
I could
TAM
not
is the
pick.
issue.
As I said, like, Dario is walking a fine line between getting nationalized and made part of the federal government, which, by the way, if the computer is self-improving the computer, it would probably be the right thing to do for the U.S. government to just say, actually, this is ours now. Because at least you have the possibility of democratic control versus, I don't know. I don't trust Dario that much. He's the one I trust the most, but like,
At the
and
end
also
of the
there's,
day, he's still a CEO and he's got his
yeah,
investors.
but
So.
and the other thing is, you know, every employee, if the Trump administration declared Anthropic as their property, every employee of Anthropic would probably quit, is what I would imagine. I mean, you're taking away all the profit incentive, and then B, it's like, you know, totally against their ethos. but it wouldn't matter because you don't have the computer, and you just tell the computer like, "Hey, keep doing it. Keep self improving yourself." So
So
it's a runaway scenario for Trump or his cronies to stay in power permanently. I think is
what?
one of the we're talking about the AI 2027 scenarios, and that's exactly what they said was going to happen.
Yeah. So let's talk about arbitrarily the next 4 weeks, right? It's Tuesday of so 4 days, 2 business days since this big issue. What's going to happen? What are the possible scenarios? I suppose one is it was a whole, oh, we're sorry, the jailbreak got fixed. It's all good. It blows away. And then we go back into this conversation of, okay, what is an appropriate level of regulation required? Or what are the red flags, right? A red flag to me is it's Tuesday and there was conversations happening yesterday and they haven't come out and sort of said, oh, don't worry about it. It was
Well,
sort of
look,
a bit of this
they
and a
had
bit of that.
Mythos in February, and they've been building these guardrails since February. So in that time frame, it's like what, 1, 2, 3, 4 months from February to June. So if it took them another month to convince the government, which shut down, it had a whole regulatory commission that would evaluate AI safety. They shut that down, and now it's like, well, we need to figure out how to approve that. Can we also talk about Andy Jassy? So there was one call. Sorry, I'm gonna come back to this in a bit, like what'll happen in the next 4 weeks. But Andy Jassy is the one.
Tell
He's
people
the
who he
CEO
is.
of Amazon. His
Yeah.
team was red teaming this and looking for jailbreaks. They found it. Now, Andy Jassy, as the CEO of Amazon, is a major owner of Anthropic, but also a competitor to them in the sense that they have their own cloud AI capabilities in AWS. And Andy Jassy used to be the head of AWS. So he's very deeply involved. This guy calls Dario, gets the, hey, Dario's in in one of those things where they put the rocks on your back. Maybe he's doing the cupping. Maybe he's doing cupping. Who knows? I'd love to know what he was doing when he got a call from Andy Jassy, and Andy Jassy's like, hey, I want to talk about Amazon security or Anthropic security. Oh no, sorry, Dario's not available. Fucking Andy Jassy's next call is the fucking feds, is Scott Bessent and Donald Trump. Dude, we are not bros after that. Like, I'm sorry. I would not be cool with Andy Jassy. It's like, oh, you on my day
Dude,
off.
we are not bros. Okay.
We are not bros anymore, dude. That's bro code.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to ruin my cupping massage or whatever. And you got to imagine that, like, did Andy Jassy know that he was on a retreat? Did he wait till the one moment? If you remember Elon's biography, they waited till Elon was on a plane, I think to his wedding, to fire him as CEO of PayPal.
Yeah.
So it's not without precedent for someone to wait for you to just go out a cell phone signal and then execute a coup against you. Which, kudos to Andy Jassy if you're that brutal, because I always thought him as somewhat of a lightweight. It's like, he's the AWS guy, but he's no Jeff Bezos. It's like, maybe he's saying like, no, I am that guy, and I will do this stuff. So we
we've
go check
heard his
Amazon.
name now.
That was but I think over the next 4 weeks, like, it's a long process they got to get this level of safeguards on Mythos, and it might take them a little longer. But one of the other things I would expect is that Trump will try to negotiate what you talk about precedent, what they did with Intel, which is they took a 10% stake of Intel and then made Intel. And Trump loves those kind of deals. He could tell people, hey, I was able to negotiate a 10% stake of Anthropic for the U.S. government, and who knows what deals Thrive Capital's getting, and Josh Kushner and all those people are going to be getting, and all this different little mechanisms. But some deals will be made, some shares will be allocated to various funds and things like that. Maybe the feds get some, and then he can say, "I look at when it goes public at $2 trillion." He say, "I made $200 billion for the federal government," as if we didn't already have all kinds of tax mechanisms to recognize revenue from a successful free market system.
Oh, what's your parting words of wisdom? I'll give mine. The next couple of weeks are going to be really, really critical for a bunch
I think,
of reasons.
but people need to listen this week and next week to the Breakneck podcast, and go to our website.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so we do update. There's a bunch of stuff we add every week, every day on the website. So breakneckpodcast.com. So check that out. Matt, we did want to talk about some acquisitions this week. Do you want to go first?
Let's finish the news of the week. today was announced Roku was acquired by $22 billion by Fox. Now, you remember Fox had a lot of cash because it had divested a lot of its properties like the X-Men and a bunch of other stuff to Disney. The Fox shares have done incredibly well since then. So great job by the Murdoch family, who has traditionally been masters of running conglomerates, and they are adding a new piece to replace the pieces that they sold in the form of Roku, trying to take over the streaming market. And then they talked about today that they had more, with this Roku acquisition, have more users than Netflix. And, Fox probably wants to build a great ad network and a data collection system on that network. So size is absolutely critical to making that happen. So great job there, but it's also $22 billion of cash for Roku. Now, Roku is a public company. A company that was not public, it was also acquired today officially. We've heard, but the agreement was after the SpaceX IPO went so well, they officially sanctified and announced that there would be shares of SpaceX exchanged for shares of Cursor. Now, SpaceX being a public company, there might be some kind of lockup, but you should expect over the next few months, as this gets finalized and the lockup period ends, a huge amount of capital being returned to the VCs who invested in Cursor. And the third one was an Irish company.
That's correct.
That it's called Finn, which in Gaelic means bright, like Finn McCool. So they went heavy with the Irish. It used to be called
That's
Intercom,
a
which is
great
less
reference,
Irish.
by the way. Well done. I'm impressed.
Oh,
You've gone deep on that.
I know my Irish mythology, man. Come on.
There you go.
I speak a little Gaelic. So great returns. A $4 billion valuation for Finn, formerly Intercom.
I think that one's a great one, by the way, for Salesforce. Salesforce has been in this marketing spin cycle to call themselves an AI company. They've created Agentforce, which is, in my eyes, much ado about nothing. And the main issue that's much ado about nothing is agents are powerful when they're operating across silos, across verticals.
Mm.
If your predominant footprint is sales information, it's kind of interesting. You can slice it and dice it. And maybe you're a couple of, maybe you're in the marketing space too, within an industry, within a business rather. So they've been trying to become an AI company. Finn, which used to be called Intercom, up until about 6 months ago, I think, customer support business.
Mm-hmm.
They were originally kind of the multi-channel customer support,
Yeah, and
Twitter.
they've ridden the wave very well. I think they haven't had an explosive, like Cursor went from like 0 to like a 60,
well, I mean, they had a
billion.
pretty explosive. If you think about it, they were forced to change. The
usual point was
they were like, oh shit,
they had a great story for the SaaS era. They were this plug into your
Yeah.
website and people really use it. I think I've implemented it on my products a couple times. But then AI came and they rode that transition extraordinarily well, got the exit. Ton of money is going to go into the Irish ecosystem. Hopefully, we'll see more. Hopefully, and I think Intercom stayed in Ireland. Is it Ewan McCabe? I forget the name. Des Trailer.
Des Trainer. Yeah, I think they're officially HQ'd in San Francisco, but
but you look at the Stripe IPO, hopefully happening at some time in the definite future, and then Finn coming through. So, anyways, great news for IPOs this week with SpaceX doing so well. Ton of liquidity returned to VCs, to the people who invest in VCs. So hopefully we see a resurgence in companies being a little bit more excited about funding smaller companies because you have more cash, and then you have this exit pathway that we're starting to see M&A actually pick up.
Any comments to wrap it up, Matt, for the week?
Yeah, just a super exciting week. I think the one last thing that I put in our comment thread as we were talking about this episode is if we are going to start nationalizing any AI that's located within a country, wow, doesn't that make it much more important to launch all your data centers into space? So I think Elon was the big winner this week. He's a trillionaire now. And if anybody had any doubts about why you would put data centers in space, Trump has put those doubts to rest.
Sounds like another topic for perhaps next week's episode, Matt.
Yeah, we'll come back. We'll see what the share price is next week. It might be 10 trillion. Who knows?
There we go.
All right, Ian.
All right. We'll leave it there.
See ya. Bye.
See ya. Bye.